Engagers, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of using games and gamification in our daily lives, for example, to learn what we are teaching. And I am Rob Alvarez. I work at Ironhack, teach at IE Business School University, and so much more, and host this podcast. If you have an extra second, please go ahead and subscribe for free to our email list at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, Engagers, welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have a very special guest today, but Stefan, before we take off, are you prepared to engage?
I'm very, very excited, yes.
Let's do this. Stefan van Hooijdonk. Is that kind of the way it goes?
And you're almost native.
Amazing. We have Stefan van Hooijdonk today because he's the founder of the Global Curiosity Institute and author of the best-selling book, The Workplace Curiosity Manifesto. And he's been working initially in investment consulting, setting up executive education, the China-Europe International Business School in China. And he held executive roles as chief learning officer in Fortune 200 companies like Nokia, Royal Philips, Cognizant, Saudi Aramco, Agfa, Flipkart. And he has lived and worked in Belgium, France, Hong Kong, China, Finland, the Netherlands, India, Saudi Arabia, and the United Kingdom. His last role was the chief learning officer for Cognizant, where he oversaw learning and development for over 300,000 associates across the globe. He researches topics of the workplace curiosity in companies and believes that these curious individuals need curious environments to thrive, and especially in times of turmoil, where individuals and companies need to embrace intentional curiosity. He has been helped by a number of diagnostics that he designed for creating insights into what drives and enables or prevents individuals and organizations to show up curiously. He consults global corporations and leadership teams towards building a stronger curiosity muscle, and he's a regular speaker around the world for the power of curiosity to benefit professionals, leaders, teams, and organizations. That was, I almost ran out of breath, Stefan, but an amazing career that you have going on there. Are we missing anything?
No, that's just too much already. Maybe one small thing. I bought a piece of land this year, 20,000 square meters, and I'm building a food forest on top of it. So I'm becoming a half of a farmer, which is propelling my curious journey because there's so much to be. Curiosity is often strong in the beginning of things. We might talk about it. This is now my big learning project.
Amazing. And talking about that's the latest project, but I don't know if that's what you do every day, sort of all the time, or you're doing other things. So we would like to sort of get into the habits, the routine, or the life in general of Stefan. What does a regular, maybe day, or if you want to go for a week, whatever that looks like for you, we want to sort of be in your shoes for a bit.
Well, I'm trying to combine my time between researching, kind of looking at my own data, but also researching adjacent areas in the area of curiosity. There's so much to be learned. So that's one thing. We can talk about that later. And then I'm trying to do 1 or 2 presentations every week for customers, inspirational talks to boards, to leadership teams, to sometimes entire companies, and the preparation that takes with it. And then I have the other bucket probably, which is anything else.
Whatever else comes up.
Yeah.
Right. Well, curiosity is leading that, at least for sure, that part of your days, right?
Absolutely. It's amazing, this world of curiosity. I plunged into it a couple of years ago now, and it's magic how much there is to learn about this curiosity, how sometimes it's so difficult for individuals and for companies to deal with it. Startups typically are strong at curiosity because they have a strong exploration desire. And then by the time startups become scale-ups or even grown-ups, they're in danger of losing that muscle. I, for instance, found in my work is that grown-ups are about 4 times less ready to learn from mistakes when I compare them to startups. So
that is a large number.
It is, isn't it? Absolutely, because and I think it makes sense. I was talking to a chemical company recently, and of course they're very high on quality and making sure that nothing goes wrong. And he said, not jokingly, that he needed 700 signatures to change the quality manual of the company.
700?
And then in such an environment, it's not strange that people sometimes might just say, I'm not going to be bothered, to suggest changes, to ask questions, to suggest new answers to old questions, or to ask even new questions, which is quite dangerous because in an environment which is changing as it is now in the 21st century, then there's so many new insights that are coming. And if companies are not careful, they're just going to be outdated within no time because of an underlying disrespect for openness.
Actually, you mentioned this. Some of the listeners might know I live in Spain, right? So my mom is also living in Spain now, and she was getting some tests done, right? Exactly what you mentioned, of course, in a different setting. It is a health setting, right? She went to this large hospital. They were performing the test, and they said, you needed to do a 6-hour diet before getting this test done. It's like, yeah, I haven't eaten anything in the past 6 hours, right? And even probably a little bit more because we've been waiting for half an hour. It's like, oh well, yeah, that's kind of true. The thing is that the paper they give you, right, says you need to not eat anything for the next 6 hours. But some people have a bit of a longer digestion. So what I personally recommend, and I've been trying to get the hospital to recommend this as well, is actually 8 hours, right? And bear in mind, this is a public hospital, right? So the resources there, you're not actually paying for the test. You are paying with taxes and so on, but not directly, right? And they have to repeat the test because, the stomach was still full. Well, not full, but still had, some residues and so on. So they had to repeat the test. And all because, it is so hard. The guy apparently, and I believe this doctor, what he was saying, well, I've been trying to do this for months, maybe years, trying to change this 6-hour thing that says here for 8 hours, be a little bit more restrictive, but to make sure that we don't have to repeat the tests. And let's say it's just, 10%, 1% of the people who have this, you have to repeat those tests again. You're losing money just for not changing a word right into something that you're printing out to all your patients.
Well, yeah, you see, this staying with the status quo is sometimes much more powerful than the opposite.
And it's not even change, right? It's just, making sure that things go according to the standards that they're expecting. But anyways, we're diverging into sort of health and not necessarily curiosity related issues. So Stefan, we would like to get into a story of one of those times where, you were using curiosity to, it's from what we understand, you're basically, one of your focuses is a learning area, right? So maybe you were using curiosity for some learning project, right? And things didn't go as expected, didn't go as planned. And, you had what we like to call every now and then a first attempt at learning or a fail, right? One of those things that, things didn't go exactly right. But of course, eventually you either fixed it or, got over it and went to something else. We want to be there with you and take some lessons out of that.
Well, it's a super question, but you make me think now.
And those are the best ones, right?
Well, let us park this. I'm sure I'm going to answer the question in a while, but I'm trying to think very carefully about my recent, since I set up the Curiosity Institute, and I think everything has been going quite well. Well, maybe something that there's many things I learned, and probably we need a couple of hours for that. But one dimension that I learned is that curiosity is, because of the conformity and because of other dimension, is an early adopter thing still. I'm doing a lot of work with startups and for leaders in big organizations, grown-ups and scale-up organizations that quote unquote get it immediately because they're highly curious themselves, because they have a certain sense of openness. And then you have everybody else. They generally value the role of curiosity, and they agree that curiosity is linking to innovation and engagement and products, etc. But they're a bit more afraid of changing their culture or allowing me in, or anybody that focuses on curiosity, the few people at least, because they're not an early adopter. And one way for me to go around this was to write a book and to create a mainstream vehicle, and that the Global Curiosity Manifesto, or the Workplace Curiosity Manifesto, which you just mentioned, was one way to go around this. Now it's a big learning, because I spent more than a year writing the book, almost full time. But it was for me a way of getting the right attention for this, and it seems to be working. Because of that, and because of continuous marketing, more and more companies are waking up now to the idea that post-COVID and then into 21st century, maybe we have to start asking different questions, or maybe we have to create a different culture in our organizations, one that allows a certain confident humility on the managers, or that allows more psychological safety, or more diversion thinking, or more tension in the system, and therefore more curiosity.
So what would you say? I mean, I see that you were talking about, trying to reach people that are not early adopters, and has been really difficult. So you took an approach of actually writing a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get there? Like, did you have some sort of, I don't know, idea storm, or how did that go? Like, how did you get to the conclusion that, at least for your sake, writing the book was the way to go?
Well, if you're not an early adopter, then people are typically looking for proof points, or what has the neighbor done, and all kind of confirmations that the investment is not going to be taken in isolation, that whatever I'm doing has some proof points, and this is a safe thing to invest in. Say, curiosity work and consulting on curiosity or so. So a book was really a good way for me to research what other companies were doing, but was a good way to think very carefully about models on how to make it worthwhile. Because when you're writing a book, you have to reflect deeply. And I spoke to lots of people, and I made the knowledge and the research so much richer, I think. And that gives so much more confidence now to other companies than the early adopters to believe in it. And I was very lucky to have somebody who coached me in writing the book. I had started about 3 times in my life writing a book. I always wanted to do this. And then by the time I got to 150 pages or so, I stopped and I shelved it, because I didn't know how to get the book on Amazon, or how to turn it into a book, or what the entire logistics, and how to find a publisher. And I was very lucky to find somebody who actually coached me and helped me in going through this. And that's probably saying that we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, and we always need people to help us.
Always, always, always standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, that is part of, I would say at this point, civilization, of human civilization in general, right? There's no way we would be talking if we weren't standing on top of the shoulders of people who invented everything that goes from, building, electricity, internet, computers. There's so many things that are built upon, so we get to the point we were. And even if we were sat down talking and chatting over a cafe, there's commerce, there's, the coffee you're drinking and the way the technology is being used to that, the coffee, where it comes from. So it's also, the technology that took to bring this thing from this side to the other. Like, there's so many things involved. Even, there's some that are like super obvious and straight to the face. And then there's it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's a huge amount of things you're standing upon to actually be able to doing. Usually like 99% of what we're doing is all the time on that. And of course, on top of that is that we build upon and have a conversation like this one, or find out about our curiosity, where it leads us, or learn this or do that, right?
Absolutely.
When this topic comes up, I always like to sort of dive in, because it's easy to forget how different our lives would be if we didn't share information as human beings, right? Like, if you didn't share this information, it would be impossible to be where we are. We'll be so far behind in so many ways. Far behind, or at least living so differently, for sure.
It's interesting you mentioned that. In one of my models, I combine, typically when we think about curiosity, we think about worldly curiosity, interested in the world, a child looking at, making sense of the world and engaging with it, or an Einstein studying the physics of the universe. And linking to what you just said, I've added 2 dimensions. One is empathic curiosity, interested in others, in ideas of others, and the reactions and the emotions of others, which is very necessary, because nowadays we're not working in isolation. We're not living in isolation. We need other people for language, for our livelihood, for our knowledge. And I've also added a 3rd dimension, which is probably underpinning it all, a self-reflective curiosity, of being curious and inquisitive about who am I as a person, what are my values, what is this life's purpose, why was I born, and what are my superpowers to get me there. So that's maybe leading us a bit too further, but especially the empathic curiosity, was sparked when you mentioned what you just did about so many people creating the good things for us.
It's amazing, and empathic curiosity is super important. And you were just mentioning as well your models, right? So let's say you are faced with a problem, right now, right? Say, and you want to use curiosity as a way to figure out a solution or a way out of it, or whatever that looks like. Do you have some process, some models? How would you go about solving a problem using your curiosity? Like, what does that look like?
Well, that's a great question. I'm often talking about three dimensions of or three strategies to use when trying to be more curious. And that can be applied to anything really. And where you could use AIM, AIM as a way to remember this. A stands for awareness, becoming aware. I stands for intentionality, and M stands for measurement. And if we're thinking about awareness, it's the entire area of self-reflection. Am I more leaning towards curiosity or its opposite, conformity? Am I more into a curious mode or am I more into a judgmental mode in acting with myself, in acting with the world, or acting with others? And what is my curiosity about the world? What is my curiosity about others? And what is my curiosity about self? But it can be that you might be really good at one and not so good at the other. Some people are very curious in their private space, but not at work, or vice versa. So it's creating this entire awareness area. Am I working for a curious organization, or am I working for an organization where it's all about the rule of the leader and the rule of law and following the processes and efficiency? And so that's awareness. And then it's intentionality. What do I want to do about it? What strategies do I want to use or deploy to get better at a product or myself or so? Because I believe that curiosity is like a muscle that can grow if we do something, if we enable it, or atrophies when we don't. And then you can have different strategies. For instance, when a strategy for curiosity about the world could be to learn something completely new, to start a new project. Or sometimes I tell people, next time you go to a bookstore, buy the book next to the book you want to buy. And let serendipity slip in a little bit. And it also links to openness and being open-minded and letting that novelty enter into your space if you let it. So that's some strategies about to deal with curiosity about the world. And then you can also have strategies for curiosity about others. And curiosity about others is not only to get more curious about the people you don't know, it's also getting more curious about the people you know. Most couples, they separate not because they're fighting, but because they find themselves bored with each other. Because at some point in the past, they stopped exploring and the fire died out. So one way could be kind of reconnect with the people that you know. And there might be also a strategy of how to deal with people that you don't know. There's this great saying by Abraham Lincoln, and he said, "I don't like that man. I need to get to know him better." And it's a strange combination of two sentences, but it actually makes very much sense. When you don't like a person, you have two strategies: either you push away the person and you don't want to deal with him or her, or which Abraham Lincoln did, he embraces the person and says, "Well, maybe not liking has more to do with me than with the other person. And maybe I need to find out, and maybe I can learn something in this process." Or sometimes what I tell people, try to have lunch with the colleague that is furthest away from your own thinking in the office. Or are you only having lunch with the people that are like-minded and you want to stay in your echo chamber, or do you want to learn something new? And then curiosity about others, an intentional strategy could be, curiosity about self, and a strategy could be articulate your values and find out what your superpowers are, and maybe engage in some meditation or some other strategies to really ground yourself better, to find better answers to those questions. And then you have measurement. I've created a number of tools online which people can take to find out their curiosity profile in the world, in others, and self. And I'm also doing work with entire teams where I'm checking the environmental aspects of how much is the organization supporting curiosity through its processes, through its culture, through its practices. But it doesn't have to be qualitative. It also can be quantitative. We can also ask our colleagues, our family members, how do I show up? For instance, did I show up in the last week curiously, or did I show up full of judgment? Or how do I react in this meeting? Or as your manager, am I more curious or am I more the opposite? There's ways to check in with other people to help get better at this. So does that answer a little bit your question?
Yes, I think so. I think it provides so many tools and so many ideas of how to be more curious, basically, on all the different dimensions that you were mentioning. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. And Stefan, talking about curiosity, of course, I mean, I know you gave out so many tools and so many ideas of things to use to increase that curiosity. But is there a best practice, like not a silver bullet, a best practice, something that you would say, well, for increasing your curiosity, if you do this thing, or I've seen that when people do this thing, there's curiosity superpower is increased. Does that make sense?
It is. Well, I don't like the silver bullet list. I don't like those management books where you have the 5 proven things, do this, and naturally you learn a new language and naturally you'll become a better version of yourself. That's why I like the awareness, intentionality, and measurement, because it's relevant, but people have to do something with it. Now, I think maybe the opposite of curiosity is conformity. At least that's the opposite that we have now. And we can talk about, because we have the very different definitions of curiosity pre-1950s, where curiosity was very negative, really. Only after 1950, curiosity became positive. So conformity is the opposite. And maybe back again with awareness, I'm encouraging people to find out what is their conformity level. And there's 2 types of conformity. There's one is kind of the conformity that we impose upon ourselves, the behaviors, the thoughts that we create, because basically, and there's nothing wrong with conformity, because we want the world to be overseeable, we want to simplify the environment around us. We want things to be predictable. We want things to be efficient and familiar. And for that, we create all kind of strategies to stay with the status quo in our thoughts and our behaviors. We're not letting new thoughts getting too close. We disregard information which does not fully correspond with our thoughts, our beliefs, our worldview. We surround ourselves with people that are like-minded, etc. So how aware are we in this regard? And then conformity also has another dimension, this conformity that's imposed by others. And we let others do it, leaders and family and companies, because basically we have a basic desire to fit in, to be liked, to appear to be a loyal member of the tribe, to belong. And our strategies there is following leaders and not checking or not questioning the orthodoxy, or not standing out too much, because we don't want to be the target of animosity and rejection, So just knowing where am I on that scale between conformity and curiosity is an important dimension, because conformity is always a base position. We're always drawn towards conformity. Curiosity is strong in the beginning of things. We spoke about it a little bit. And then after a while, when we become used to the new environment, we stop asking questions because conformity sets in. And so curiosity is almost an elastic band that pulls us away from that conformity. And that's why we need intentionality. When we leave it to chance, it's not going to do anything, really. And pulling a little bit on that elastic band puts us into discovery or rediscovery of what we know already. We become better at our professional life. We start learning, becoming a better professional in the things that we know already. But when we pull even further, then suddenly we start exploring completely uncharted territories. And for me, that's the difference between broad and narrow curiosity, because we need both, really, in driving towards the future. So the silver bullet for me is know thyself, or try to know thyself. Socrates said it already a long time ago, I think. And if you do that, life is simpler and easier.
I think knowing yourself is one of the most important, but also one of the most difficult things to do. Would you agree, Stefan?
Absolutely. I'm 50. I always get it wrong. I'm 53, I think. And I'm loaded with 53 years of dust on my soul because I'm walking around with narratives of who I think I am, with beliefs that I think that are genuine, with a certain level of naive realism that the world is exactly how I perceive it, and it's hard to uncover that diamond deep inside, devoid of any of those beliefs or biases or narratives. And it takes quite a bit of effort, like meditation, like walking in the park, like life altering experiences. And sometimes we can experience those when we're on holidays and we see a sunset. At those kind of milliseconds, we're in touch with ourselves, but then life takes over again. And that also shows that somehow we need space and time to be curious. Because when we're too stressed, a little bit of stress is good, gets us out of our comfort zone. Too much stress is paralyzing. And if we're looking at everybody that's working, I've not met many people that tell me that they're not stressed and they're fully at ease. But that should be an aspiration for leaders, for people themselves, and for organizations. How do I create an environment where people have time to be curious, have time to think, to challenge the status quo, etc.?
Amazing. Thanks a lot for all of those insights. I think there's plenty engagers. If you lost anything, definitely the good thing is it is a podcast. It's recorded, so you can go back 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, no problem. Re-listen to this, finish the episode and listen to it all over again. There's so many insights here. I have so many notes on what is going on, but I would like to continue making further questions before we say it's game over, right? Before we finish the podcast for today. I do have a question that we like to ask guests. And of course, right next to your book, because we know we would all recommend your book. But is there another book that you would recommend on the topic of curiosity or maybe related topics that help engage curiosity? Like what would be a book recommendation that you could give us?
Well, there's probably two books I would recommend. One book would be The Art of Subordination by Professor Todd Kashdan, because his book is really talking about or giving guidelines on if you want to action your curiosity towards others, towards teams, towards organizations, towards society, here are some strategies on how to do that. And I think that's very powerful to link that to curiosity. And then there's another book that I'm just reading now. It's Karl Popper. He's a philosopher. And he wrote a book. I'm reading it in Dutch now, so the translation should be The Open Society and Its Enemies. And that's a book about how society, basically it makes me think. And the book and the philosopher is looking for reasons why, what are the differences between open and closed societies? I'm trying to make the link then to open and closed organizations, open and closed people.
Huh.
So these two books would very recommend. So Todd Kashdan's book, very practical, actionable, and very close to curiosity. Karl Popper is more of a general book to open our minds.
Both sound like fantastic books. Stefan, before we wrap the things up, I want to know, what would you consider is your superpower? Because you mentioned this word at the start of the podcast. And I want to know, I'm sure you've done some explorations, and at least at this point in time, what would you say is your superpower?
I'm perseverant. Perseverance, I think, is my superpower. Is being consistently driving towards the same goal and be flexible, but not let too many things interfere.
Sounds amazing. So, Stefan, we're running out of time. I know you have a busy agenda as well. Is there anything else that you would like to sort of give some final words, some final piece of guidance, some final advice, whatever you want to go for? And of course, let us know where we can find out more about your work and this online world of ours.
Well, you could, of course, find me on the website, globalcuriosityinstitute.com. But instead of advice, I have some questions. You piqued my interest in the link between gaming and curiosity. And it's going to be with me for a couple of weeks, I think, now moving forward. So if you can share with me some research on the link, if you find anything, the link between curiosity and gaming, game design, game psychology, I'd love it.
Amazing. I know from the work of Yu Kai Chao. He is a leading expert in the world of gamification, and his I'm forgetting the name of his Octalysis framework, Curiosity on Octalysis. I'm actually writing this down right now in a browser to make sure I get that one right. He does talk about one of the 8 core drives in gamification. The core drive 7 is unpredictability and curiosity, right?
Hmm.
So this is a lesson that he takes from games, and this Octalysis gamification framework has, he's used it plenty and mostly in his consulting, but it's a very, very, well-known book. It's been translated into so many languages. I would say, is one of the most successful books in gamification. And there's all sorts of things and all sorts of ways in which games are constantly peeking into your curiosity. You could talk about a very this is one that has been very controversial lately, which is the loot boxes, right? So you have a box and you know that there's something inside of it. It usually is kind of random what's going to be inside. So you're more than in the artifact that you're going to find in the box itself, you're curious about what is in there, right? Once you get it, as you were saying, the initial curiosity is a lot higher. Once you have it, it's probably not as calling it has a huge meaning as it has when the box is closed. Or if somebody comes and opens it and the artifact comes out, you're not curious about it anymore as much as you were. So going for the box is not as interesting as it used to be. That's another reason why when where you're about to watch a movie, right, and somebody gives you some insights into the movie, it's like, you're screwing the movie up for me, right? Because they're killing your curiosity. Does that make sense?
Very true. You just reminded me of Pandora's box, and
Yeah.
being curious what's coming in and not coming out. Beautiful. I'm going to check him out. You Kai Chao.
Yes. I'll send you some text so that it's easier to find. I know his name by now in the gamification world. Many people already know him. Until you know him, figuring out the writing is not necessarily the easiest one. He's one of our first guests on the podcast as well. But
Super. Thank
amazing.
you.
So Stefan, thank you so much. Engagers, you can find Stefan as well on the globalcuriosityinstitute.com. You can find him on LinkedIn, definitely. He also has Twitter. So many places where we can find out more about his work. However, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Engagers, it's fantastic to have you here, and thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast. And I'd like to know, how are you listening to this podcast? Because if you are doing it through any podcasting app, I would like to know if you have followed, if you have subscribed for free and rated this podcast, or either of them. Please do so if you haven't already. That way, it'll enable us to reach more engagers like you and achieve together this mission of making learning amazing. And if you want the instructions, you can go to professorgame.com/iTunes. You'll find there the instructions for 2 or 3 of the main ones where you can do this. If not, it should be fairly easy. You just look at the episode, you look at the podcast, and there should be some stars, some ratings, some subscribe. It should be relatively easy. If not, shoot an email to rob@professorgame.com and I'll help you with that for sure. And before you go on to your next mission, please remember to do that, to hit that subscribe, that follow button. All of this that I'm saying is absolutely for free to you using that favorite podcast app. And of course, listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.